Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to come into the final or the closing session. Uh, uh, tomorrow will be actually tomorrow we'll be delivering another session on historical writing, but this is the last session, the closing session for both tracks for the GCC China relationship, which has been concluded a few minutes ago. So it was supposed to present two papers during this session. The first should have been, was supposed to be presented by Mariam Al Hajri virtually online, as she is now currently in the UK. But 1 hour ago, I was informed that she's not. She was sick, and she sent an apology uh, email. She is a very promising Qatari researcher, and I hope that she will get well. And second paper will be the only paper which will be presented by Dr. Saeed Al Hashimi, who uh, who actually works in United States of America. The theme or the title of this paper is the Arab Gulf state culture in a critical framework. Mr. Hashimi, he is a researcher of Houston University of United States of America, and he is a PhD researcher in history. He holds a master's degree of academic studies from UK in 2006 and a BA in scientific policies, and he is human rights policy human rights activists, and he authored one of them is titled Oman, the Human and the Power. The title of his paper is the Post Arab Revolutions Omani Culture 2011. Yes, he's the only one of this session. Just for sake of justice, we'll give you only 20 minutes. Although you are the sole presenter, then we'll open the floor for discussion and questions. Due to the time available, maybe the our guests might have a question regarding the cultural policies of the Arab Gulf states. Most welcome, Dr. Saeed, in the Arab Center for Research and Policy. Dr. Haida, I would like to thank you for your kind invitation. Wishing Dr. Mariam will get better soon. I was so pleased to see my name and with Mariam. Mariam, she is a very actually prominent and outstanding and excellent researcher in her approaches. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank as well those who behind the scene, behind the stage, those follow follower who actually played a very important role to organize this important forum. If you allow me, Dr. Haida, actually my paper will address clearly and specifically the cultural protest post the Arab revolutions that began in 2011, the concepts of cultural protest. My paper is not meant to evaluate the GCC culture, whereas we have selected Oman as a sample and a model of this study or a case of study. As you know, the revolution that includes all concepts, practices like protest, demonstrating. The protest has a special, actually enjoys a special place of Omani collective memory. Our culture has is rich of culture of resistance due to the geographical political location. Same time, the about the doctrine, also the internal conflict over power, In addition to the same time, we see that the colonization, colonies, Portuguese colonization, that's as well the British colonization, with the same time it extends until post that era. At all these stages, we witness protests and demonstrations and revolutions that reshaped the balances, powers, and kept the collective memory and the essence of a protest. The protest of Oman, collective memory plays a very pivotal role. So we talk about during 2011, we witnessed the began of the Arab revolutions, where Mohammed Bouazizi, the Tunisian icon who caused this, were in Oman. So the protest was not limited to public yards, Suhar, Solala, or Muscat, but at the same time we have observed cultural protests were actually to where the central authority tried to eliminate protests in the public squares, as we have witnessed in other parts of the Arab countries. So culture actually creates a space of argument, not a recreation. This reflects a true argument of culture during the modern formulation of the central power and its executive tools. The context in which the kind and limit of central authority of Oman, especially during the modern age, was completely different. The context comparing with the other countries, I claim it was a revolutionary context, was not a calm, it was complicated and revolutionary. Oman, the authority after this long revolution refused to allow cultures and its liberal concepts to form the country based on a social contract with the people that can mandate individual or group to run their public affairs and maintain their individual freedoms. That's why culture kept left under a laws and regulations that control all its vital details and annual programs. Post oil exploration, the priority for man actually focuses on providing of services, security, food, water, education, and housing. These actually priorities turned into a solid concept basis. The culture at that time was not among these priorities. With the entanglement of these social interests resulted in a confusion of the concept of culture, especially from official perspective, where the culture became ambiguous because concept. So those who resist this concept, in order to approach the cultural process of Oman, I try to resort to the main resources. I have not used to strategies rather than I have used something which I believe is the true reflector of the policies and strategy, which is the laws, package of laws and legislation that reflect the personality of the state. What's the role of cultures in public policy before 2011? I will share you three or four arguments. These policies actually suffer from the popular arguments from the beginning. For the Omani modern government were susceptible actually, and were that's why the central authority dealt with culture as something of a has of a sovereignty nature. She refused to leave managing culture to coincidence or to Omani public space, and it was not spontaneous that those who were responsible for managing Ministry of Culture since its establishment in 1974 for someone who was outside the circle close to the ruling family, even with other ministries like defense, intelligence, or Ministry of Foreign Affairs. All these ministers were have been run by a number of men who are not from the royal family or ruling family, whereas Ministry of Culture minister is close to the ruling family. At the other level, culture is linked to media, which reflects that both of them are key elements or strategies that have impact on souls and minds that actually plays a major role in eliminating the revolutionary rhetoric that was prevalent during the 70s. Next argument is the traditional and modernizational rhetoric. We talk about the tasks that this minister is performing at the top of these responsibilities is to bring alive cinema, music, arts, and popular arts, and everything, including the improving of the cultural level of people, as well as censoring and control over the publications and implementing laws that to protect public behavior and public attitudes in different domains. It's clear based on reviewing this text that it's self-explanatory, which reflects the key mandate of this ministry is to disseminate the folkloric concepts of culture and maintaining traditions and protection of public behaviors, attitudes, with the same time monitoring and controlling, same time try control and not openness. Control and not freedom of expression. That's why these main headlines determine the role of this official entity is to renovating castles and fortresses, collecting manuscripts, organizing festivals. The third argument that's that actually was a key characteristics of these cultural projects is the security argument. The publication and press law is the law that govern all the dimensions of cultural publication. No, no, all the all the drawings, pictures, images, and all kind of publications were victimized by this law, where this law controls the dissemination, auditing, and expression of views, including audio, visual, written text, or printing presses. Those who review this text that was issued in 1984 is fear of cultures and its manifestations and its products, newspapers, music, books, law, Article 65 of the law related to the civil and security arguments, where this article stipulates regarding the committee that's responsible for implementing and enforcing this law. This committee representative from Ministry of Media, Ministry of Endowment, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and representative of the Royal Court, as well as Omani Intelligence Department or Bureau. So this law covers all aspects related to the press, journalism, and protecting and holding journalists accountable in case they violate their duties stipulated in this law or this code of conduct. And this committee has the absolute power to enforce the appropriate sanctions or punishment. The last argument is the mandate and scope. The culture actually suffers the conflict between different authorities and entities, Vermont, which has a negative impact on this sector over the last 5 decades, which resulted in distraction, lack of mandate, duplication in terms of decision making, which resulted in unsatisfactory outcomes for artists or scholars, where the government itself believes that culture is a liability or is a burden, which is and not an addition, which is ostensibly showed seen that one ministry is responsible for culture, whereas the current situation was to the to the to the contrary of that. We are with Ministry of we have witnessed a conflict of mandates between different ministries, where the Omani Royal Court is responsible for collecting manuscripts, whereas the 80s, the argument was observed between the office of the Sultan, Mr. Muhammad Ahmed Saidi, and the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, and Ministry of Journalism regarding the collection of old manuscripts kept by the religious clerks, and lack of coordination and wasting money and time that resulted in distracted efforts, where some texts were published, others were deformed, especially those who actually conflict with the political religious rhetoric of the political regime.
This dispute lasted and even expanded in the 1990s, and from the beginning of 2001, the Sultan's cultural advisor had almost full control, and they had a budget and direct orders from the Sultan to lead expeditionary campaigns at the archaeological side. They awards for books and translation and biography of the Sultan in different languages, established chairs at different universities at a time when the Minister of Culture was suffering from the lack of financial resources. As for cultural protests in 2011, the Omani youth responded to the wave of Arab revolutions, and their demands were not different than those in Sana'a, Cairo, in the Tahrir Square, Tunisia, and all these countries. And that is to live in dignity, justice, uh, wealth distribution. They were not aiming at regime change or deposing the regime. They wanted some sort of a financial reform and political participation. The protests were oppressed and many were imprisoned. And what concerns me here is that the protests moved from public squares to other fields, and the writers tried to instill that in the collective memory of the people. I claim that from 2011 until now, the protest movement flourished really, and they recalled a lot of ideas which have been choked for a long time in the hearts and minds of people, and the writers gained their own self identity as a result of the severe censorship. And also, the society realized that it's important to have a collective voice to express their demands. And the period which immediately followed the evacuation of protests from the public squares ushered a new era in writing. If writing is not based on the feelings and reflects the feeling and the expressions of people, then it will have no soul. There were protests against political oppression, religious oppression, and suddenly you feel that many writers have suddenly discovered the importance of the collective memory, and that the ruling authorities cannot exercise full control over public life through its own controlled narrative. And from this reminded people of the earlier decade of 1965 to 1975, which spread throughout the Dhofar and some parts of Kuwait and Bahrain. And this was the silent part of Oman's history that there is no mention of in the media or history books or textbooks. And this was a taboo for decades. Any book which was sent to Oman, which had mentioned of this period, was immediately confiscated. Although, as a memory, it remained amongst people until it found the moment of expression 2011 and onwards. For example, Ahmed al-Zubaydi, who wrote A Woman from Dhofar, his own autobiography, A Man Between Two Worlds and the Years of Fire, and he talked about revolution, protests from inside Oman. He had also Nasser Saleh, his collection of short stories, which he wrote after a period in prison. Then he had another collection called Durub in 2015, and Hamoud Saud had another collection, and Sulaiman al-Ma'mari wrote a novel by who does not love Jamal Abdel Nasser, Muhammad al-Ihya'i, Yaqub al-Khambashi, and Muhammad al-Shahri also wrote a collection of short stories. How did the authority responded to this inertia of cultural protest in this decade through the following? First, um, issuing more stringent laws and legislation and amending the already existing legislative framework, and most of these amendments were in the law on criminal activity and the law on publishing and expression. And, for example, Article 7, Article 74 of the Criminal Code was very specific in criminalizing fabricating any news about events, and it added to that was anything, any statements, rumors, or writings that really undermine the authority of the state and the prestige of the states will mean a prison term. Also, the government expanded its efforts to confiscate books, and the book fair also saw a lot of books being confiscated, despite the famous statement by the Minister of Information said in this day and age we cannot ban books, but that was not translated in reality by real attempts to allow all these publications for the readers. There were investigations, court trials. What happened with Ahmed al-Zubaydi? He was called on more than once to be interrogated. Ahmed al-Mahrazi and Abdullah Habib, who is a cinematic critic, was imprisoned because he violated Article 19. Because he only wrote something very simple, and that the government has a moral obligation to reveal the graves of all the martyrs who were executed. And even the ones who called for the release of these people, like Sulaiman al-Ma'mari, for example, he was imprisoned himself, and there is a long list of writers and authors who were interrogated and sometimes imprisoned. And when the practice of munasaha, which is like people publicly addressing the government by way of advice, was also curtailed, and also the newspaper as Zaman was closed down, and also character assassination of peoples. It was not enough for the government to imprisoning them. It went further by publishing their photos and naming and shaming them. I would like to conclude now to open the floor for discussion. In 1970 or at the end of 60s, there was a song, famous song, which is called "The Story of Our People and the Revolution" by Iraqi Dari, and it became very famous, and it reflected a culture of protest against oppression that the Omanis suffered for a long time. And to an outsider, can think that the energy for protest has regressed and almost finished because of the defeat and the government's stringent controls. And amongst this generation, this paper shows that this assumption can be right partially but not totally, and is not convincing because it does not reflect the whole picture, and we try to bring in evidence from different sources, culturally and from literature, films, etc. And the protests did not stop after the protest movement stopped, but for decades afterwards it remained the material that many Omanis wrote poems about, stories, and this kept the fire of protest waging, and it came back to existence whenever it was necessary.
Would like to thank you, Dr. Saeed, for this very informative presentation in which he tried to track the transformation of cultural policies of Oman post Arab revolutions that took place in 2011, and how he where the Omani cultures and literary or literature writings addressed these protests. And this is the most interesting point where they try to restore the symbolism of the far movements within the context of protests. I now open the floor for questions. So those who lift their hand first will be eligible for questions. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Haida. I'd like to thank Dr. Said for this important and argumentative paper. I have so many things going around in my mind. I have so many questions, but due to time available, I will just focus on some key points in order to benefit from the time available. Dr. Said, you said before 2011, the polarity or uh, you address the foundation of the establishment of culture in Oman. I haven't heard anything regarding the religious formation in Oman, or the formation of religion in Oman, as well as the external factors. You address this point. Same time, you have not highlighted the surrounding factors of Oman during the 70s. At that time, where we have witnessed a lot of attempts of cultural unity, as Dr. Muhammad has discussed in a previous session, that the problematic aspect of the formation of culture. As you know, at that time we have witnessed a lot different movements, communist, socialist, as well as religious movements, and other movements resulted from communism in the far. Maybe this is one of the key reasons for strictness and as well as a reason for having strict control over culture in Oman. From my view, I believe this is one of the key reasons. Also, you talk about you have during the 90s, maybe you have selected one aspect, you have a certain following a certain mentality. Maybe you have just as you know, we want to be fair. Oman has a different movement, different manifestations. The 90s is the golden age of the culture of Oman, where we have witnessed different festivals, cinemas, arts, s- uh, drama. We have that time we have witnessed the organization of different festivals and different art events that played a major role in dissemination of culture. Uh, Sultan Qaboos chair it's it has to do with the Diwan or the Sultani Bureau. We call it the cultural protest. In 2011, at that time, we all know that these socio-economic protests originally the reason. Then there were then the cultural framework benefited from its presence, but originally these protests erupted for jobs, economic situation, or social situation. This is done historically. One more last point, Mr. Said. I would like to know why you made the literary text as a historic document that document a certain stage. For example, Ahmad al-Zubaydi during in his tale, A Woman from the Far, that he published in 2013 or 14. This tale talk about women and the far revolution and nothing has to do with the 2011 protests. This is an imaginary liter- literary text. It is not historic document that can you use to judge a certain historic age or era. I would like to thank you for this important session where we have reached a key point that the protests of the cultural protest made us remember a very important point, which is the this integration between or the fragmentation between culture. It is it is the alternative culture. The resistant culture is another alternative culture, which where so many Arab nations or even non-Arab nations in East or West they will have engaged in this cultural protest for 2 years or 3 years. And all this started to appear after the foundation of independent countries. Regarding these countries or post-independent countries, we have witnessed the emergence of the establishment of cultural alternative in the area of cinema, in the area of committed song or the movie making. This is This is that would have an impact on the on identity, identity where the current authority deems it as a rhetoric that can use to impose what the government wish to. That's why all key players in the of the community have a different point of view, and this leads us to a and the fragmented identity. Or that's why modernization and development and advancement and progress in our countries. I'm not talking about Oman here in particular. I'm talking about all Arab states. That these countries that draw their cultural policy in our countries conservative would like to perpetuate what's been adopted by conventional societies. The same try to export what's related to folklore or anything related to recreation and entertainment, which means that there's a resistant power to what's can be considered as a mainstream to impose something different. And this culture of resistance that would like to be a replacement faces a lot of challenges due to lack of freedom and actual democracy. I'd like to thank you, Said. I have three key points I would like to raise. As Dr. Hayat just said, is we have two aspects dealt with during the oral culture and the written culture that's expressed through protest. Now, if we place the fire revolution in the center, I think this requires further study and research. Second point, as you know, that the our ministry are no longer Ministry of National Tradition. It became Ministry of Culture. So the ministry changed its name, and this is, as we know, those who worked on revolutions of Oman, we have benefit from the publications of the ministry itself, from the perspective of the ministry. For example, the Ibadiyya doctrine or Ibadiyya sect that can be placed in revolutionary context. I'm talking about different eras or the previous eras. The question here now you have Ministry of Heritage and Tourism, and the other hand, a Ministry of Youth and Sport. So you link culture with to youth. Does it have to do with the protest, or this naming has been selected randomly? I'd like to thank you, Mr. Saeed. Those who actually encounter criticism should accept criticism. Otherwise, this will be a conflict. I have enjoyed what I have heard, and I believe this paper is a political protest paper that addresses the concept of a protest itself. I have three simplified questions or simple questions. First, you said the cultural strategy of Oman is based on framing, not openness. As open as the normal case, that should be openness, not a framing. I have no idea where this concept come. Maybe the normal situation is framing or openness. I believe culture is subject to framing. This is the original concept. If you approve or disapprove, this is something else. Religious can frame things. So the concept of framing and not openness as for criticism, I can't understand it. Only if someone say that openness is placed in the core essence of a human, and this leads us to another philosophical discussion about the nature of a human. That's why I understand why openness is the original, but not framing. When I was listening to you, I have recalled the criticism of the authority during the Enlightenment age. Foucault is the theorist of power. He criticizes says that they address power as a power that for suppress, not to create, not for suppression, not for creativity. Same time, if it's all the power serves as a suppressive, but it can serve as a creative. With oppression and suppression, there's a creativity at the same time. I would like to learn about Oman. I understand you have you have scholars who are alienated. I understand that, and I'm sure that we can't find an society that doesn't have such a phenomenon. But I'd like to learn about the public or general cause of Oman. I'm fully assured that the authority, when it reproduces itself, it does not only rely on power. There's culture that goes in parallel with the practices of the government or the authority. And this culture can produce or can criticize some aspects, but it runs in parallel with the government. And this is what was missing from your paper, or what your paper lacked. Yes, we are, with all due respect to those who express some kind of defection or resistance. So yes, yes, there's a culture that's been disseminated, and we do not learn about this culture.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Said. I enjoyed your paper, although I missed the introduction. I don't want to get involved in the controversy of the relationship between the intellectual and the authority in Oman. I don't know enough about it. But you have said, though, that culture can take two paths, one to do with ideas and one to do with projects. When when culture was outside the scope of the authority, the intellectual produced a lot and he had positions on so many things, and without that, you cannot call him an educated or intellectual person. Do you agree that today, I'm not talking about Oman, I'm talking about the entire Arab world, the governments began to realize the importance of culture as a project. So that's why they're focusing on like music festivals and others. And whether we agree with that or disagree, and through music, theater, or and writing in general, are we here facing a new approach to minimize culture and or education and turn it into projects only? Thank you, Doctor, for a revolutionary opposition paper. We in the world of literature we consider all works of literature, even if it's from the imagination. Literature is a red line. We consider them all as historical records because they document what the mind thinks at that particular time and space. Of course, openness is the essence and not censorship. A question which may sound naive. Personally, the the in the Gulf and in the Arab countries in general, culture seems to be loyal to government. Do you think this is different in Oman? Thank you, Said, for your paper. You have really done us all a favor because a lot of the heritage, literal heritage, was kept away. But this is different history, and it starts with that book, Oman, the Man and Authority. Regarding framing, I think most countries have been framed one way or another, but sometimes there is an exaggeration in this, in writing, history, and literature, and some symbols. But the problem is now in dealing with literature, which is building on this oppressed memory. I think to deal with it as a mere protest stops us from dealing with it or with what was part of the imagination and what is history as history and was literature as literature and what was uh, an event in that particular moment. Yes, all of these can interact, but I want to understand the current scene now. Thank you, Sahid Al Hashmi, my dear friend. I think what I say also, my question can sound naive. You sound like the authority, the ruling authority in Oman oppresses culture per se. I think in every country in the world there is a prevalent discourse which allows and bans. America is a democratic country. How many intellectuals or TV presenters were attacked because of their position vis a vis Gaza? So every political system will have its own discourse through which it will allow for certain things and not allow for others. I'm looking for a third way, a third path. This is one thing. I also claim that the political values for the ruler is more progressive than the social. I mean, the book you wrote about, there is an article about Fatma Shidi when she talked about uh, expelling women from the tents during the protest. And if we compare that with the reform movement or the enablers which were given to women in Oman, we'll find that the state is more advanced. I'm just making a comparison. I'm not taking any stance from by the government or the society or anybody or you. Your paper is more like a protest. I respect your opinion and we are here to discuss. Thank you, my dear friend Said. Thank you. A question about your choice of the literary examples And also, is literature a historical document or not? Why did you choose these particular examples? I think you chose them as part and parcel of the symbolism of the Dhafar revolution, to reuse them and to use the literal covenant that it can be, as can be, a story can be told in more than one way. So do you think that and to rely in a protest, rely on literature instead of writing directly and more frankly and candidly? But Sanallah Ibrahim wrote about Yaqub al-Khambashi, Bushra Khalfan, Zubaydi, they're all written about it. So a story can be told in more than one. Is this just a hidden way of protest, or is it an attempt to restore the symbolism of revolution through works of literature? Thank you. Adil Manna from Jerusalem. My question is about the current situation in Palestine. I want to link that with the question of oppression and resistance. My question is as follows. We noticed that in the last 2 months, maybe, throughout the world, even in Western countries, there is a reawakening towards the rights of Palestinians at the level of Nobel Prize winners, artists, writers, and in the Arab world, and especially in the Gulf countries, there is silence. This is how we feel in Palestine. We do not hear these voices of protesters. So if we go beyond the current situation, can we say, and as part of this literal protest, uh, we we did not hear about on the agreements which were signed by some Gulf countries and Israel, and the exchange of visits and Israeli leaders visiting these countries. Did that have any resonance in the literal writing in the Gulf? I will destroy you now. To talk about Saeed and on Saeed is a complex thing. Since the days when he was with us at Kuwait University, when he was studying, was mischievous. Even in Kuwait, he used to lead the students. So this is a built-in protest. Even against the Kuwaiti government, he would protest. He has no problem with that. But in Oman, do you remember the year when I visited you? 2016. I was invited by the National Defense Academy to to lecture in closed sections, closed sessions for 5 days to present before security and military leaders. I was invited once to Saudi Arabia to speak before Sharia judges on death penalty. So this kind of audience I do not get to meet directly, so I jumped at the opportunity. And of course, Saeed, they have another group. He said to me, we can arrange for a lecture for you on human rights, and it's still on YouTube. You can watch it, you'll see something very strange indeed. I went there and they were very generous in their time. I'm talking about the security personnel. I asked them a direct question. I was in London on a sabbatical. I said to them, I come from Kuwait. In Kuwait, our ceiling is high, the bar is high. They said to me, no, feel free. And I did feel free, and they were very respectful. After that, we went to the lecture, the protesters' lecture. The first thing I was surprised said Saeed told me that the venue was changed to another hotel. And when we went to the second venue, and it's on YouTube, you can, as soon as we started, they switched off the electricity lights. So, so the boys were ready, they had projectors. So I said to them, your light is enough. And I did lecture. They told me that there's so many cars outside, they belong to the security forces. And 2 days later, I have a good friend who is very high up in the government invited me to lecture at the cultural club, which is considered part of the government. And this has caused a lot of confusion in Oman society. What's this man doing? Who has he come to? I had invitations from TV stations and everywhere, and a senior security official came to me and he said I was away on leave. I said we did not like you to go to a hotel. I said, what's wrong? I'm staying in the hotel. I said to him, I didn't mince my words. I said, I really wish that you try to understand this youth. I'm willing to play a mediating role. These people, these young people, are not seeking to overthrow the regime, but they have ambitions, they have ideas. Most of them are written. He said, anyway, this is a message, and the meeting did not take place. I'm only telling you now that as long as Saeed is here, so I hope that continuity should be there. Change is a mark of love. In the political game, the only constant is change, and oppression which comes from the top does not last long. And I hope that you continue in your literal protest. Thank you. I have to go now, but I said I had to say this so that Mr. Haider and Said. Thank you, Haider. Thank you, Said, for this paper. In the closing remarks, you said the protest movement is still continuing. My question is that the social media after 2011 has contributed to this, like podcasts and others. I think what we reaches us is what is allowed. But the podcasts from Oman, I think they are better than any other country. Of course, Kuwait, which is another thing, but the ones emanating from Oman, although they are within a certain framework, but do you think this had a role in this? Thank you. I think before I go back to Dr. Said to respond, I just want to take 2 minutes on the paper. This is uh, this is the last session, and it's on track 2, and we will publish something on the cultural policies. And when they proposed this paper, we said to Dr. Said that the role of the state in cultural policies and the change in cultural policies is an essential part of this paper, and the part pertaining to the stories, and Dr. Said is more knowledgeable in this. I think I think there is a phenomenon which exploded in recent years. You cannot really reduce it to the question of protest on the far. In fact, our unit was supposed to organize a seminar on the novels in the Gulf countries, but the war on Gaza forced us to postpone that. And maybe on the 20th of January or around that, we will invite some sociologists to organize this, and Dr. Said knows about this. I come from a literal background myself. There is no problem. You cannot separate the literal text from its context. It's not a historical document, no. We cannot say Sultan Qaboos started his reign and so that according to a novel by no. And neither can we use academic works of research. But I want you to be sure that it will be according to the standards by our center. The theme will be protest, but it does not necessarily mean it will be.
I would like to thank you all for your interventions and questions that undoubtedly will expand my perspective and prospect. I would like just to bring to your attention. Well, I can't within 20 minutes to respond to all your interventions, but my paper actually discussed the religious aspect and the conservation of modern and traditional heritage, where I have brought different examples even during the 18th and 90s before the protest. That my paper actually includes all these details. During the 90s, Dr. Aisha, this is the golden age of the Omani culture. Maybe this is argumentable actually, but would like to say here that the culture of Oman, it was not actually, not everybody can express their views regarding economical, social, or political contradictions at that time. If somebody has different idea, please go ahead. Culture at that time was a very sensitive matter, dealt with a very oversensitivity. Even if you would like to host Dr. Aisha, you were the president of a cultural club. The list of your guests should be submitted to or 1 year before to get approval of, yes, for hosting those guests in your culture club. You cannot host someone, any cultural institution or any university can host someone from abroad, provided that approval, security approval, of course, official approval should be obtained and submitted. This is a sign or an evidence that things are not open enough. Dr. Sai, maybe you'd like to meet friends of yours or visit you from Oman, or I would like to organize a seminar or discussion meeting in a coffee shop, for example, you'll not be allowed to do that. What's normal is a freedom, freedom, not slavery, not oppression or suppression. What's what's the have five or six friends we can meet in a coffee shop in one of our Omani city. We discuss a book. This is not allowed. Now things changed after paying a heavy price, where people were imprisoned, people were have been actually oppressed, where where that time people have fear regarding expressing their views. Talk about people should person should be free and should not feel afraid of discussing any book. Literary text is not a historic document. I believe the mirror that reflect the contradictions of human is literature. It's a key indicator for the evolution of a society. Umberto Eco, he is the professor of semiotics. Things that cannot be theorized can be told. Storytelling or narration here can, if you would like to learn about the Napoleon, there's a very important tale, War and Peace of Tolstoy. It approaches the complexity of mankind at that time. If you read for Ivo and Nitrich, River at the Rena Bridge, you can learn about the complicated situation of Balkan. Reading only abstracted textbooks cannot give me cannot provide me with a clear details about the type of a human that were used to live at that time. So this matter was not allowed, it was not permitted. This is what I have hypothesized in my paper. Before 2011, you cannot publish. Well, those who publish outside Oman, like those living in Kuwait and Egypt, like Fawzia Shwish Salem, she published different articles in Kuwait. But I'm interested in those who living in Oman, inside Oman. Ahmed Zumaydi, he authored a textbook called A Woman from the Far. He could not publish before 2013. And personally, he told me, now it's time. After the protests that took place 2011, the the social incubator is willing to accept such kind of literary works. At that time, those who dared to write such things were imprisoned or forcibly disappeared. Now we have so many authors like those those stories that authored now. It was impossible to be published before 2011. Yes, we can't deny what's happened in 2011. It's economic, social, and political protests that actually resulted in the shift of the cultural aspect. And at the same time, it redefined imagination. Imagination is a tool for freedom. At that time, people used to imagine a policeman walking behind him, whereas currently the situation is completely different. Youth, researchers, uh, writers, yes, there's a space available. Why? Because the historic context is completely different. Saeed al-Tarshi, you said that, yeah, I did not say that the authority actually oppresses culture. It's more complicated than that. Suppresses, whereas suppression and oppression at that time was prevalent and dominating, whereas people managed through their own struggle and suffering managed to expand the space of freedom. The government or the authority has not grant freedom to anybody, whereas people managed to get this freedom, this historical moment after the Arab Revolution. Even Sultan Qaboos at that time dealt with this resistance in different way. America is not a role model or an example in order to compare or to measure or to contrast America. USA is the worst place to discuss freedoms. America is completely outside the context. Why we compare ourselves to USA? We can compare ourselves to our culture. I've never considered America as a norm for comparison. Literature, yes, literature is the only tangible thing that expresses the aspirations of people. In my paper, as Dr. Haider said, in my paper, there's an example of, of drama, a story. This was a play, ولد البلد, Malcolm Salman. It was actually, it was performed in QNCC in 2017. It's a beautiful play where they have using art, art to reflect a kind of resistance. It's my right to say no to the mainstream voices. That's what should authorities right now understand, that this current generation and future generation no longer want to shift the social or political regime. They want to create a regime that's consistent with their aspirations. Dr. Adman Nas asked about yes, there are a lot of resistance to the agreement of normalization with the Zionist state, Israel. Yes, our colleagues are constantly write articles that reflect their beliefs that the Palestinians should have their land back. And there's Abdulaziz al-Farisi novel that talked about Palestine. It is the certificate of the death of a dog, where in which they focus on the forced displacement of Palestinians. Yes, Palestine is always in our heart and in our collective memory. Hamid, I believe imagination itself is an area of conflict. Even memory became a field of conflict. Defeat is always is not defeat. It's not defeat is not defeat in a war. Defeat in a memory. I think the most serious thing that we are as Omani face today. My paper is not has nothing to do with the far revolution. My paper, I belong to a generation when somebody asks what happened in the 50s or the 70s, people start looking to the right and left and keep quiet. Tell us what happened in the 50s and 70s. So this is a defeat of the collective memory. Yes, the fights are over. Those who took up arms no longer exist. They died. That's why we need to bring back status to collective memory and to rewrite literature. This can be done through literature that will bring back this status and consideration in order that current generation have confidence, and this generation belongs to a culture which is not less important than the culture of resistance in any part of the world. We used to actually praise the culture of South Africa or Gandhi resistance to colonizations or Vietnam or that only authorities authority are the one who suppress the collective memory of its nation. I will conclude here, Mr. Ibrahim Al-Bakr. Yes, the means of communication has played a major role in reinforcing the confidence of current generation to share their ideas and to communicate and to write and to rewrite history. And in Oman, I believe yes, now we have a very promising generation of Oman. I'm proud of Oman generation that is proud of their cultures, that would like to express themselves different from this image drawn by the authority. This average Omani is an Omani which is not different than the Tunisian, Sudanese, Iraqi. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saeed. It was a very informative and outstanding discussion. As I said, this forum will continue tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be talking about historical writing in the Gulf countries in the same venue, as well as the GCC China relationships forum has ended today, and we see you in the 11th annual Gulf Study Forum. I would like, as Dr. Saeed said, I would like to thank those who are working behind the scene, including the organizers and our colleague of the Arab Center, the interpreters, translators, technicians, those who have booked the tickets, all those who made it possible to have this forum. The workers, all of them made this forum possible. Thank you.